Hey everyone, Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. I'm talking with Chip Webster today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about education and volunteer work, but I'll let Chip introduce himself.
Well, I'm mostly retired. My background started out in the retail business and ended up in the CEO peer group business for over 30 plus years. I've either been running or running the organization that ran CEO peer groups and was also a member of one. And that's where I learned a lot of the group dynamics experience. I now volunteer for Tampa Bay Watch, which is a fabulous organization. I also co-created a thing called Keepers of the Flame, which is a very successful small group program that we run in Boulder every year. Sit on a for-profit board to keep my fingers in that, and do a little coaching. But most recently, my focus has been on the book Unity and Service that I just published, and it really starts out talking about how divided we are. We're living in a very toxic culture that's dividing us further and further. And my objective is to break us down through three initiatives, break down the barriers. And one is to get people to think about, what does a responsible citizen do? What does a responsible citizen look like? And how can I be a responsible citizen? Um, by encouraging people to volunteer in programs, service clubs, community projects. Habitat for Humanity is a great example, where you get out of your silo, turn off your TV, and go out and work with people towards a common goal to help the community. And lastly, I think that we should have required national service for high school graduates when they turn 18. And you go serve the country for a year, but in a different market than where you're from. So if you're from New York, you go to Texas, or Texas to California. But the idea is to break down these barriers that are totally illogical, that the media has been stimulating because that's how they sell advertising. And I think working together on a project that's good for the community and good for the nation will naturally dissolve many of the barriers that separate us.
So much so. In many ways, things like the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts,
Yeah.
or those groups that kids belong to, but at some point in time, they became toxic. And there was also church that people belonged to, and then that became toxic. So there are all these sworn by services and things that young people normally did in the past 100 years, that we don't do anymore.
Well, it's a combination. Both my sons are Eagle Scouts, by the way, and they're in their late 30s, early 40s, and that experience has helped them. They both have their own businesses. They started from scratch, and the experience of being an Eagle Scout, getting that award, helped them be a better leader, a better individual. And I think what happens is, with some institutions, if one or two people are really bad, we throw out the whole institution. And once again, sometimes I think lawyers and the media exacerbate it. But we have to understand that nothing is perfect. None of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. But we have to say, what is going to help our society move forward? And I believe working together towards a common goal. I mean, there'll be a point in time where somebody in Habitat Humanity will steal some money, maybe, and then we're going to get rid of Habitat for Humanity. It's a wonderful organization. Why are we throwing out the whole organization because of one bad actor?
Maybe with the bathwater. Yeah. I mean, my dad was a Boy Scout, and the things that he taught me, I became a Girl Scout, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work. Brownie. I never went into Girl Scouts. But, those are the things that, they became replaced with all of these school activities. So soccer, basketball, band. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. I don't know. The thing is, we're all depending on the school to take care of the student. So it's sort of like throwing them into a one shop, one stop, one shop, solution.
Right. And the schools spend a lot of time filling out paperwork and following very specific rules that they can or can't do this. I was talking to one of the heads of Habitat for Humanity, and he had some volunteers there. And the phone was ringing, and he asked the volunteer to pick up the phone. They said, well, according to the rules, I can't do any clerical work, so I can't answer the phone. It's like, come on, really? So there's no logic in a lot of these programs. I learned a lot playing football. I never was a big starter, but I played on the team and learned how to work as a team and grew a lot on the field. And I watched my son, my youngest son, who played college football, D3, he learned a lot on that field that you cannot learn in the classroom. Most
Well,
specifically,
there's definitely something to say with team sports.
yeah, right, absolutely.
Say specifically, what did you learn?
Well, I have two philosophies of life, or one success philosophy. When you're down, get up, and don't kick a skunk. And you learn on the football field, when you get knocked down, you get back up and get back in the game. And I think a lot of people, or younger people that I've observed, not all, a few, and they're the ones that we focus on, unfortunately, they get down and now they're a victim and they don't know how to get back up.
Well, victimhood by itself has replaced responsibility.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
much more important to share how much of a victim you are, all the transgressions and trauma and all of these things. Now, I'm not trying to be light about anything that has happened to people, because in many cases these things are pretty serious. But I was listening the other day, and they were talking about therapy, and they said it's very important when you go to therapy that you just don't go with the first therapist. It's sort of like when I was going to Al-Anon, I went to a number of different groups because I needed to fit in and where I felt comfortable. So it's the same thing with a therapist. You've got to feel the therapist out. In many cases, they may not be solution oriented.
Yes.
And they're going to have a pity fest every single time you go in.
Right.
Which is not going to help you get out of that hole. That I appreciate that you go to therapy, you're generally hurting, but you need to, and something that I did through therapy was develop a toolbox where, I recognize the behavior. My bad. What do I do to get out of that behavior? What's the next thing to do?
So owning your own stuff and realizing there's an old saying, nobody's going to save your ass but your ass. We have to understand that, I go get this help with a therapist, but now I've got to learn how to function in society so I can be effective and not. The term microaggression is one I just fall over laughing about. And in my book, I talk about helping, opening the door for people and validating people. I should have called it micro validations, but we're grow up.
It's difficult. I understand, I mean, pain is pain, but if we live in a society where we value pain over strength or,
right.
And, that's what we're doing. We're calling men toxic.
Right.
And we're saying that, everyone needs to show their feminine side. And again, there's nothing wrong with validating the in us, but at the expense of the masculine, it doesn't, it's only got one half of the coin.
Right.
And you really need to be able, every man and every woman needs to be able to know, this is going to trigger me. It's not their fault. It's my fault. I need to know what to do when I get to that point. What do I do? What do I pull out of my toolbox? Or do I
Yeah.
just pull out my keys and leave? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do.
Yeah, and sometimes that's very appropriate. Absolutely.
Right. Necessarily telling people off every single time is not, it's not worth it. And never telling people off is not right. There's somewhere down the middle, and that's what life is going to teach you. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to burn a bridge, and you're going to say to yourself, never do that again. Or burn a few bridges, and then at some point in your life say, I can't go back. What did I just do?
Well, I EQ. If you think about it, it's knowing there are times when it's appropriate to burn a bridge because you're being so abused, and you can't tolerate that. So you owe it to yourself to burn that bridge. I've had to do that. I had to do that with a good friend, but he just became so abusive to my wife and to me, that it was like, no, I'm done. It was his mental issue, and I'm not going to suffer from
it. But it's knowing how to do that so that you're not throwing away all your friends that disagree with you.
Oh, no.
But many people will just do that because the new thing is, nothing negative. I had many interactions with people who say, oh, I don't like negative energy. And I'm like, what does negative energy mean? Have you ever heard of risk management? Like, you need to know the difference between what energy, negative energy is, and somebody saying this is risky behavior.
It's interesting. How would you know what good energy is if you didn't have negative energy?
Exactly. Well, that's the point.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're defining negative energy as anyone who says no to you, that's possible, but it's not. It's not real clear. It's not real clear.
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier about kids. If you always let the kids do what they want to do, they're not going to grow up and really function in society because they're unaware of the norms and how we deal with each other.
Yeah, that goes along with the awards at school where everybody gets an award for just being there.
Right.
And that's problematic. While you don't want kids necessarily crying at school, the point is that they should be learning how to buck up. Like, our team just lost. Okay.
Yeah, right. And
gracefully say yay to the other team.
Right.
You're not going to go crazy over them, but all right, we tried hard.
Well, it's learning how to lose gracefully and win gracefully. It's a two-edged sword, and you have to care about people's feelings so that if they're beat down and lost, you don't just discount them as zero. I love watching coaches get interviewed after games, and I love the coach that says, the other side did a really great job. It's a really good team. We were just better today.
Yeah,
that's class.
It is, and I think these are some things that we're forgetting about. I don't know why. I mean, did the pendulum swing for a reason? Because it seems to have swung all right to one side, and why did it do that?
Well, I go back to my, victims. People want to be a victim. I have this. I believe in a meritocracy. The best people should be on the field, period. And I tell this story to some people. I'm an old guy. I'm slow. I can't jump, but I want to play in the NBA, and I'm being discriminated against, and I should be able to start for the Lakers. Well, who's going to come and watch the Lakers if I'm on the floor? Nobody. The best players are on the floor. The best CEOs are running their companies well, and the ones that aren't, eventually the company goes broke or they get fired. And they're not victims of somebody else. They're victims of their own behavior.
Mm. Something I was just thinking about, something that happened in the 80s, and it was merger acquisition, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of companies were getting swallowed up by other companies. And the
Right.
first thing that they would do once acquired is send in that audit team, audit departments and audit processes. And, that was when you knew, all right, we're getting laid off. And as a marketing person, I got laid off about 2 or 3 times through those acquisitions.
Sure.
And they were painful, right? They were scary. They were painful. And through that process, benefits started getting dropped. Loyalty to companies started getting dropped. The thought that I work for a company and they're good to me and I get promoted and I move up got dropped. All of these things. So corporate America offers nothing to anyone. Now, I don't know if that's right, wrong, or indifferent, but it's also part of the endemic problem that I see, that the steadfast relationships, the loyalties evaporated.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I went to Drake University, a little town in Des Moines, Iowa, small college, and we're going through basketball disloyalty. When I was there in '69, we made it to the Final Four. It's a great team. This several weeks ago, we made it to the 32, but our coach did a really great job. He was like 33-4, I think, at the end of the season, and he got robbed. He took us from our small school for money to the University of Iowa, and then the players are all leaving because they get NIL money, and 18-year-old, 20-year-old getting $5 million to go play basketball at a bigger school. It's all about money and fame. There's no loyalty. It drives me crazy. They'll say this guy plays at Kansas now, but he played at Iowa State, he played at Drake, and then he played at East Postal Montana University. 4 years, 4 different schools. What does that teach us? College sports were still supposed to be about education. That's what John Wooden was all about.
So the common thread here is somewhere down the line, we forgot what the American dream was, and we transferred it or translated it into money. Now, it had something to do with the mercantile system, and capitalism, but it wasn't. It wasn't about make the most amount of money you possibly can and make sure that you get everyone out from all of your competitors, squash them. It wasn't that. It was the freedom to do that.
Well, yeah, you go back to Rockefeller and I think it was Roosevelt did a lot of Teddy Roosevelt did a lot of breaking up the monopolies. So that behavior is not new. The government is supposed to give us guardrails. Here's the field you play within these rules, not here's the field you play within the rules. They need to be broad. But also, Joy, it's funny watching companies, and I've worked with hundreds of companies, literally, the CEOs. And one of the things that is interesting, a lot of these people who got kicked out of the bigger companies started their own businesses and created a family kind of atmosphere. Now, as they get older and they want to retire, then companies get bought by another person or private equity, and there are good private equity companies and bad private equity companies, and we see the bad ones get the most press. Back to the Boy Scouts, how many millions of kids were Boy Scouts, and there's maybe a half a dozen really sad stories. So let's get rid of all the Boy Scouts.
Perhaps, perhaps it's a matter of perspective where what we're seeing is all of those clickbait topics that get us excited, and the feel goods don't get us excited.
No.
You know, the commercials are all about disease, so we need to be ill in order to, show that we're purchasing the promotions that are, it's sort of like a very odd thing that's happening.
And then there's the lawyer's disclaimer at the end, this may make your skin look good, but it could kill you,
Okay. Right. Liver medication that will, cause
Right.
liver damage. It's
Right.
like, what? I'm not really following this. Did you just tell me that? And I think it needs to be, it needs to be cleaned up. But more than that, we need to take the responsibility back. So, if and the responsibility is not necessarily about marching on Washington, although it could be part of it, but that's not the solution. Also, the solution isn't making a video and sticking your third finger up and, calling somebody a Nazi or something. That's also not a solution. That's actually exacerbating the problem.
Well, I had an interesting experience about a year ago. I was at Deb's grandson's graduation, and one of his uncles is in the sheriff's department in Los Angeles. And it was during the demonstrations at UCLA, pro-Palestinian demonstrations. And I asked him, I said, what, I grew up out there, so I'm very familiar with it. I said, what's going on? He said, well, the fact is that we know George Soros is actually backing these. They're paying about 40% of the people that are protesting. And they all have an 800 number. If they get taken to jail, they call the law firm that Soros set up, and they get out of jail. And I believe in protests. I believe in free speech. But I wonder if somebody's paying you to do it. Is that really free speech, and is that really sincere? It's a job. Yeah.
What do you do for it? I'm a protester.
Yeah.
What do you protest? Whatever they pay me for. And, that's what I'm saying. I've had this conversation many times with people on LinkedIn who these people are trying to get up with me, and they're telling me I can make, you can make six figures. And I'm like, that's lovely, but that's not necessary. Obviously, it's the reason we work. I'm not saying
we got to eat, right? We got to eat.
I'm saying it's not the six figures that I'm interested in. It's finding the vocation that's going to carry me through my life, because at some point in time, I'm going to get older, less able to go through an interview process and get hired over the younger people. So I need to be able to be confident in what I'm doing, enjoy what I'm doing, and carry it through my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, and some of my 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're not, this concept of the six-figure income, or the dual income, or the whatever it is. It's all of these things. That I get it. It's innovation, but the point is, it's not the money necessarily. Salary, not this. Oh, I could be a multimillionaire and see I'm at a coffee shop in Mexico, and the sun is out and I'm about to go to the beach, and that's what I do, and love it. I love it, but I don't. I don't know how realistic it is. I don't even know if it's real.
Well, much of it isn't, by the way.
Yeah. Because in a year from now, when you realize it's not gonna ride yourself into the next, like I said, the 30s, the 40s. it's not the free ride you think it is. And at some point in time, you don't have a home, you don't have a group of friends, you've been fluttering about. Good time. I'm not saying it's not a good time. I'm just saying it's very odd. I believe roots are very important, and we need to start thinking along the lines of, I think, as you said, being a responsible citizen, you know,
Well, in my
thinking of family and volunteering. You can't do that if you're not in any spot for any length of time, or you can,
right,
but I'm really saying
it's hard.
it's
Uh,
difficult. I mean, you could volunteer for a habitat. You can do that, and you could just travel.
right.
There was another group, I can't remember that. They may have been purchased by Habitat, but after Louisiana, right after
The
the storm,
hurricane. Mm,
the
mm,
the storm that
mm.
that really did them in. Saint Bernard, I can't remember, but I worked with a group. I think it was Saint Bernard. I worked with a group that was, rebuilding the neighborhood.
Right, right,
They were taking people from all over,
right.
and it was wonderful. And they were carrying on for 10, 15 years, and I think they eventually went to Habitat. And the concept of a company like that where you can travel, like nurses, for example, traveling
Yeah,
nurses.
yeah. Deb and I just did 5 loops of the U.S. In our motorhome, which was also a stimulating experience that motivated me to write the book. But we stayed at a lot of RV parks and started talking to people, and the number of traveling nurses and doctors that were living in their motorhomes, and 6 months in Omaha, and then 6 months in Santa Monica. It was really interesting how many people are doing that. So yeah.
I think there's not. I'm not trying to say that it's not a good idea for young people to travel. I think it's great. But I think it's important that at some point in time they reconcile why they're traveling and how they're going to put down some roots. Because I do think we all owe something back. We all do. Every single one of us.
Absolutely.
Not just to our family. That yes. There's more than that.
If in the early part of my book, I talk about why tribes exist and ultimately why do nations exist. But tribes, we helped each other survive. And, there was a time in our human history where, if you weren't part of a tribe, you're going to get eaten because some animal thought you might taste good, or you're going to get run over by a tribe of people that are together that they think you're encroaching on their territory. So, you get together with a tribe to sustain yourself, to feel part of something. And we're still very tribal as human beings, but the purpose of the tribes have changed. A lot of it's one of the things I enjoy about sports is you feel you're part of a tribe. I'm a lifelong Dodger fan. They won last night. It was fun to watch.
Yeah, but the
So
Dodgers are from New York.
I know. I was in California when they came, but I used to listen to Vin Scully when he was still in Brooklyn. So, but yeah, and that was a violation of tribe, wasn't it?
It was.
When O'Malley moved him to L.A., he left behind a tribe that was burned, rather than starting a new team on that. That's got it. So
We do need tribes. I mean, we need to know that there's someplace we can go where we can just, relax and not feel threatened.
Yeah, you feel safer when you're in your tribe, right? And
know that the support is there.
Yeah,
it opens quite a lot. But
and part of something bigger than ourselves. That's
right.
really important.
but living in that tribe forever, which was something that humans did thousands of years ago, um, we will not grow if we just stay in the tribe. And our population is too large for that to happen. So it's counterproductive. It's counterproductive. Where it used to provide us with that safety net, now it's an echo chamber. And there was a point in time, in history where, okay, you had a tribe, and if you intermarried too much in the tribe, it became a bad thing. You had to go outside your tribe to find your mate.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't keep marrying your cousin. It's not going to work. So, I mean, that's a fact. And that's, if we stay in the tribe, it becomes, everybody wears the same colors. Everybody says the same thing. It's very supportive. It's a wonderful thing, but you do not grow. And at some point in time, it works against you. You become weaker, not stronger.
It's interesting how complex it all is.
Yes.
You may have heard of Advanced Auto Parts. It's a big retail, yeah. And I was coaching the CEO of Discount Auto Parts, and we did a transaction. I was on the board. We did a reverse triangle merger that took. Advance was much bigger than us, but we were the public entity, so we did a transaction, took it public. But the CEO, who died before that, was this great person who understood that there's times in your life where you have to make that change. And he was an attorney, successful, and decided he wanted to build this family business. When I first met him, they had 25 stores. When we got done, we had 750 stores. But he said, I have to change who I am. I have to change who I'm hanging out with. So he stopped hanging out with his tribe and started exposing himself. Went to Harvard Business School, joined Vistage, which was a peer group for CEOs, and he just became an incredible leader. But had he stayed where he was, he wouldn't have become his full potential.
Right, and that's the point. It's somewhat like when the native has to do that adventure and they reach that benchmark age where they have to go out on their own and do that adventure. I think that's, that was the coming of age. And I think we all need to do that. That's sort of what you support when you're talking about that required service. So, high school kids who are living in their tribe, they're living in their little community. And as kids are, they've got their high school friends. Many, 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 many times, high school lovers marry. I'm not shooting that down. But I'm saying,
yeah, right.
And many times they stay in their parents' house.
Mm-hmm.
When the parents, move on and they stay there, or they buy a house in the same. There's nothing wrong with that. I know many people in my neighborhood who have lived in this neighborhood. They went to school here. Their parents went to school here, and their kids went to school here. So there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point in time, the child experiences something else, and we call them internships, and in many cases, and I think you'll agree that they shouldn't be optional; they should be required.
Well, yeah, the whole idea of the national service is to make that a transition from youth to adulthood. And by going to a different part of the country, by interacting with people from different backgrounds, you're going to see a different part of the world that may be important later in your life. I was active with an organization called AMI Kids. It's a wonderful organization that takes troubled kids that the court appoints to our program, and our objective was to get them to a high school GED. And one of the senior guys there would adopt sort of a kid and help them. And this particular person took a poor kid out of the ghetto, black community in Orlando, and took him to University of Central Florida. His early teens, and the kid had never traveled anywhere. And there's black people on the campus here. He had no idea what was beyond his little neighborhood. And that, I haven't talked to the guy in a number of years, but as he explained the story to me years later, it just opened up the kid's whole world. And one of the things we're doing at Tampa Bay Watch is we're taking kids out of poor neighborhoods who live in Pinellas County, which is a peninsula, getting them to the beach where they've never been before, and helping them understand the ecological system of the bay. But it's just, you live 10 blocks from the beach and you've never been, but it just what we're describing is opening up a world of possibilities.
Right. And, I said this in college when I was graduating. I thought, I'm in this field, and it really would make so much sense if there was required internship. So if the school has a department, they need to have something set up so that every student takes, they force you in New York, they force you to take an athletic class. So set it up so that every student has to take something within that major, whatever it is.
Well, the reason I picked Drake to go to school, my dad was executive director of the Kemper Foundation, so he knew a lot of the schools around the country. And Drake had a program where you got credit for working I worked at Sears, and that's actually my best class. It was work because I was a work-oriented person. But to graduate with my retailing degree, I had to work in a retail store. I mean, my dad had his doctorate, and it drove him crazy because he, worked as a teacher, worked as a vice principal, worked his way to get his EED. And he said, these guys that come out of these universities that get their undergrad, master's, and PhD and have never worked in a field have no idea, they just, oh, look, I have a PhD, which doesn't mean anything until you've been out there and done it.
Yeah, I mean, there are many majors that in school that essentially you're going to stay within the school system forever. That's the concept. When I graduated with a degree in the classics,
mm-hmm.
There was three things I could do. Three things. I could become an archaeologist, which is what I wanted to do. I could go into museum work, which mm-hmm. I would have done. But that's a separate degree, but that's neither here nor there. Or I could stay in the system, the school system. I could teach Latin, or I could teach history, whatever it was. And it never occurred to me because no one ever said that to me. Mm-hmm. I thought, I'm going to be an archaeologist. But nowhere down the line did someone say to me, and this is now in college, okay, so you want to be an archaeologist? So the teachers here are all affiliated with schools, other than, this is what mm-hmm. teachers do. They're mm-hmm. affiliated with schools. So, you're going to go on a dig with this summer. This is what you're going to do. Wouldn't that have been a great idea?
Huge. And two things would have happened. You would have been more committed to archaeology when you got done, or you go, you know what? This is not what I want to do with my life. How many people?
Somebody would have seen me and said, oh, you know what? She's, let's grab her.
Right.
She's a worker.
Right.
But, as I said, I'm not necessarily saying that, and there are many volunteer groups that are doing this, that, do different things where you can there's a volunteer group called Earthwatch, and they grab a lot of different opportunities um, all across science, education, all across the board, where
Mm-hmm.
you volunteer, you pay, you volunteer, and you do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. It's a great opportunity. But if when I did that, I volunteered and I did an archaeological dig, and I was with a bunch of students, college students, and I thought to myself, why was this never offered to me when I was in college?
Yeah.
I don't
That's
understand. Why did somebody say, Joy, you're thinking about doing this? Why not, get yourself in line with this? Here's this person. I suspect that in many cases, had I been a more driven person, I would have found this myself. But I think that in high school and college, I think the assumption shouldn't be let them do it themselves.
well, especially in high school on your way into college, you don't know what you don't know. And supposedly these counselors, quote unquote, are seasoned veterans and they should know what the options are and they should know what's the best course of activities to go through. I was lucky. I loved retail. I worked in retail when I was in high school. I paid for most of my college working in retail. So I knew what I wanted to do when I got out. But, 5.5 years, 6 years after college, I decided to leave and go into a different industry. And because I got recruited. And, that changed the whole trajectory of my life. But I never, I had this foundation of working with people and selling that helped my whole career. So you build on all those things.
Yeah, you said something about recruitment, and I'm wondering if there's not enough of that. I mean, people are looking for over the top celebrity people. Again, they want, these recruiters will make money on who they recruit. So
Right.
they're looking for these outstanding people, which is okay. I get that. I get that.
Right.
But there are a lot of, let's use the term underachievers that are like turtles, slow and steady wins the race.
Right.
And recognizing that, for recruiters to say, there's not a lot of money in this person. I'm not necessarily going to make the commission on this person, but this person is going to be slow and steady and win the race.
Well,
Recognizing that talent.
right. Well, slow and steady, yes, but there's some that are just slow. Period.
Yes,
There's a bell curve,
right,
and if I'm running a business, I used to coach my CEOs. You cannot win the Super Bowl with C players. So
right.
when you're building a business and trying to serve your market, you're really have to focus on, okay, I've got this spot based on how big I am and how much I can pay, who's the best person at that level I can hire. Now, as you build an organization, you're going to have people come in who you think are going to be A players. They turn out to be really solid B players, and those are worth their weight in gold. Whenever I had my CEOs rate, I'd say you can rate them an A, really great and promotable, B, really solid, and D, needs help, or F, needs firing. And they said, well, why not a C? Because you're going to make everybody a C. You're not going to be honest with yourself. Somebody is either above average performer or below average performer. There is no C. And sometimes when I watched at Sears, when we did one of our first purges, right after we moved into the tower, they fired a lot of people. Not well done, but they fired a lot of people. And a couple of the guys that I knew left and were really upset, but they found another career. One guy became the number one realtor in the western suburbs. Had he not been fired, he would have been this mediocre, unhappy person buying boys' outerwear for the rest of his life. Well, until the company failed. But and he went out and created a wonderful business. So I think that part of the journey of life is finding where can I be a solid B player or an A player, but not where I'm going to be just marking time. I was really amazed by. I was listening to NPR one day, and they were talking about the cuts, and I don't agree with the way everything's been handled. So, but this woman on NPR said, they're firing all the deadwood. Don't they know they have to hire people to replace them? And I almost drove off the road laughing. You're going to replace the deadwood with what? More deadwood?
More deadwood. Well, here's the compassion paradox.
Yeah.
So, what do you do with people that are mediocre? Right?
What
do you do with people that are mediocre?
You find a place where they can contribute.
Right.
And everybody contributes at some level. You don't make them CEO, but there's maybe it's running all the back office supplies.
Well, there's the thing that this is where I don't want to make it sound like people in BOCES are mediocre, but there were a lot of programs in high school that when I went to school, where at some point you realize I'm not college material. I'm not. I don't. Either the family doesn't have the money, or I get the grades. I'm not an athlete. Blah blah blah. So they go into BOCES, right?
They go to what?
And BOCES, which were these in New York. BOCES were craft or services.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So I'll be a mechanic.
Right.
I'll be a hairdresser.
Right.
Barber. Right. I'll be a chef. All these things. Right now. I just wish that the schools or the parents or all of the system was better aligned to, looking at Johnny and saying, Johnny, wow, or Johnny, and being honest and saying, how can we take something that might be mediocre and turning it into something that's going to be fulfilling for Johnny. Because, Johnny could probably sling hamburgers for the rest of his life. But maybe Johnny can run the restaurant.
Eventually.
Right?
Right.
So, and there's something wrong with a restaurant.
And we have this culture, well, he's just a mechanic or he's just a construction worker. I have one of my sons has a construction company, and there's a lot of really good people there. They're getting paid a decent wage, and they're creating homes for people. What's wrong with that? Why do we look down our nose at that? Yeah.
And not only that, but at some point, you start you go into cabinetry. You're like, I'm a craft.
Right.
I'm not just, I'm not just construction. I can build stuff. You give me a nail and a hammer, I've got a house for you, in 2 weeks.
Right. I was one of those people who hated school. It turns out I was dyslexic, and my wife tells me I'm ADD, which is probably true. My college counselor or my high school counselor said I probably didn't need to go to college. Okay, well, I knew what I wanted to do, and so I went to junior college for a year, and then went out to Drake and graduated, and by some people's standards, have had a pretty good run. And you as an individual, you have a responsibility to yourself to not let others define you. But and by defining somebody who is building houses as less than stellar is equally as bad as firing somebody and telling them they're worthless. No, we all have a gift. The life journey is to figure out what that gift is, and it's to help others through whatever our talent is.
Right. And here's something that may be controversial, we look at many occupations as being, oh, I don't want my child to do that. Landscaping. Oh,
Hmm.
no. And so we need migrants to do that. Oh, I don't want my daughter, making beds in a hotel. Migrants need to do that. So we've done something very odd, which there's nothing wrong with any group working their way up. Why does it need to be migrants? What is the what I see here is, okay, we need people to do those jobs. It shouldn't be our children. No, they can't be our children. While when I was a kid, my first job at McDonald's, I I slung hamburgers. So I did, right? What is there a problem with that? I don't understand. All the kids, when it snows these days, I've got kids knocking on my door saying, "Can I shovel your snow, shovel your driveway?" I'm like, "Do it." I'll give them $100. The point is, what
Well,
is
where are you when I needed you for $100? I'll come shovel your driveway. No.
really? The point is, these kids should be thinking this way. They think, they should be thinking, you know what? I'm in high school. I probably could make a few bucks. What can I do? Oh, I probably could help out the local, motel somewhere. Whatever. It's
Well,
not like,
that's parents' problem. I was real simple. When I was a kid, I had to work. Starting first, real serious. I mean, I always worked at all ages, but when it was in the 6th grade, I wanted to play pee wee football. And my dad said, and I said, I need to buy cleats. He said, fine, go earn the money. So I went out and pulled weeds. This was in Fullerton, California. And next door neighbor gave me enough money that I could go buy my football cleats to play pee wee football. That was a great lesson. It's been that way all the way through my life, that if I want something, just go earn it. The number of kids and families that when I say, what is your, they're in high school, I say, what does your kid do? Oh no, they don't have a job. They're busy doing X or Y. Where do you learn about how to, just nothing else, how do you learn how to deal with people? My first Social Security, I had to get Social Security when I was 14, and I was mopping floors and cleaning up at Winchell's Donut House in Palm Springs. After they closed the shop, I'd come in and mop the floors and degrease stuff.
right.
Learned.
Yeah. I mean, you could go into hospitality at any point in time, but you could start by doing the lowly job.
Yeah.
Laundry. Again, it's just an odd concept. I find it being an odd concept that the argument is, well, that's what the migrant does. That's why we need, and I'm like, not for nothing. There are very intelligent people out there from all over the world. Why are you basically, saying that migrants need to come to America so that they can do the job that no one else wants to do? Why does no one else want to do that? There's a problem there. There's nothing wrong with working your way up. You don't suddenly, out of high school, become the manager of the Marriott.
Right.
And you go to school for that? Okay, I'm not saying you don't go to school for that, because they have that as a degree program at local colleges, But
Sure.
I'm really saying that, hey, can you be working at the hotel as well as learning? I find it's as I said, the American dream went off track and became a dollar sign. And that's not the American dream. Talk about George Washington behind you. He knew the American dream because he created it. And it was more along the lines of inventing yourself and being allowed to invent yourself without having a king tell you, well, we don't need those types of people. And if you're going to be this type of person, you need to be a member of this, that, and the other thing. And this is how we do it. Sorry, you're not, you're not in the club, so you can't do that.
Yeah, the
That
American dream is to start as a hamburger flipper at McDonald's and end up running 10 of them or running a state.
right.
And not everybody's going to be able to do that. And that's okay. As long as we treat them and treat ourselves with humanity,
Right.
And respect. Everybody, I go back to what I mentioned in the book, my new concept of micro-validations. Open up the door for somebody and let them walk through and acknowledge their humanness. One of the things that I've observed walking around the country, which I started walking when I got out of college in Chicago, LA, New York, and people years ago would at least acknowledge each other. They'd look at each other and smile. Now I have played games in different cities, done a lot of walking in San Diego, and I walk on this path in Chula Vista, and most people, they look the other way when you walk by. You can't engage them. But when you do engage somebody and say hello, it's like they light up like a Christmas tree. Somebody sees me. I'm human. And so we're talking about all these different levels of employment and so-called status. Everybody's important. Every one of us. The guy or gal who vacuums the floor in my condos, common areas, they're as important as the person who owns one of the condos. What would it be like if they weren't there?
Exactly.
We need each other. Bottom line, we need each other.
And these are viable services, and we need to stop labeling them because some make more money than others. The point being is that we need to be able to. The education system is a little screwed up. So the education system is not really teaching the right stuff. I don't know how to explain it. It's not teaching people how to be respectful. It's not teaching people how to better themselves. It's not teaching people, how to be all that they could be. It's also not teaching people to respect themselves for, reaching a particular level and having other people respect them for that level. Again, we're not all going to be CEOs. One of the problems that I had when I was working was that I realized at one point, I'm not promotable past this point because I don't want to manage other people. That's not my cup of tea.
Which is your choice.
Right. Which means I need to reconcile that and have, get the respect. And that was, once I reconciled it with myself, I realized they're not going to respect me. They don't understand why I don't want to go to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And they're offering that to me, and I'm saying, no, I don't want it. And they're like, what? She just said no. What's wrong with her? And I get that. But the point that I'm saying is that not everybody wants to be a manager. Some people like to do the work.
Right. Absolutely. Thank God.
But the system isn't wired for that. So, you're going to make $50,000 at this job and never going to make anything higher than that because that's the cap for this job. Perhaps that is the way it needs to be. Okay? Perhaps that is the way it needs to be. But if you're really good at your job and you're not going to go to the next level, you need to be recognized as such to say, this person is a master at doing that.
Yeah, when I talked about what I call the B players, the ones who are really good at what they do, not promotable, but you can't run a company without those B players. Because if everybody's an A player, typically they're pretty competitive, and then it gets ugly. So you need those people that are just solid. You were in marketing, as I recall. Somebody who really understands the market, can talk about the whole industry, can talk about what the potential is, has all those statistics, and then knows how to get creative to make the company more prominent in the market. That's a
right.
very important role.
But I don't think the system is geared towards that. I think that they want to promote somebody from within, or they're going to want to get rid of that person, because at some point they're going to want more money, and you can't give it to them, and that's a problem. That means those loyal people can't be held,
There's other ways you can
right?
compensate people with.
Right. I mean, those
You know,
those used to be, the benefits, or the,
yeah,
whatever commissions or whatever it was that you would used to make. But they did away with all those things when companies
right.
went through the audits and mergers. They're like, no, you know what? And I don't know how many times it was said to me, and it used to drive me crazy. We can fill that. We could fill your job in a second. Yeah, you could with a moron. I can do the job. I enjoy the job, and I can bring it to the next level, but it's going to be the same job. I can teach the manager coming in how, the processes. And if the manager's a good manager, then they can also say to me, we need to change the process because whatever, it's, it's
Right.
no longer, feasible. And we can grow together. But, me knowing I know the elbow grease and they're a manager, we could work together. But no, what happened was, something's wrong here. Joy doesn't want to get promoted. It's time to get her out.
That you can lose a lot of good talent and institutional wisdom with that. I mean, you had institutional wisdom that was valuable if you were there for any period of time.
The secretary, which they don't have anymore, the secretary that knew where all the bodies were buried, every single one. All
Right.
you need to say, Mary, I need, and she's like, bam, you got it.
Yeah.
But they'll get rid of Mary because, we don't need Mary. We've got a receptionist at front, and we don't need Mary anymore because we've got all these software tools that do what Mary did. But nobody knows where the bodies are buried.
No.
And that's what they got rid of.
And now, not only did they get rid of Mary, they got rid of the person at the front desk. So you push a button, and nobody, customer. I won't get on my customer service rant. There isn't any.
I hear that.
And it's all about people. I think one of the reasons that there's this unhappiness in the country is because when you try to get something done, it is so frustrating. I called Harvard University 3 days ago to get in touch with somebody that I was trying to find, and they go through this long list of things to do, and then, at the tone, leave your message. Sorry, box is full, and then it was like 3 or 4 other layers. Where at the end it was just like, well, there's no way I can talk to a human being or even send an email to a human being. Why? It's just like
very frustrating.
Do that with your bank. Do that with your bank, your dentist, your hospital.
It's all over the place. It's all over the place. I would say, one thing that we should all be doing is automation is great. Streamlining stuff is great, but keep the human element involved. Be really aware of that in everything that you do. And be aware that your kids need to hold on to that, because if they're essentially taught that you just need to make a lot of money, you need to make sure that you're the best. You make a lot of money, and go get them. Go get them, Junior. It's not that's not going to fulfill anyone. There's a whole set of, I don't know, there's a grounding that's being lost.
Well, yeah, one of my basic thoughts is that leadership can never be given; it can only be taken. And if I could tell you how many times I watch companies where Junior or the daughter was put in charge because that's what the father or mother wanted, and they were incapable of taking leadership, where it really became a disaster.
Right.
And then what you described earlier, what went through my mind was that's a zero-sum game. If I win, you have to lose, and that's not the way we progress. We win together, or we lose together.
Yeah, we really need to go back and look at that American dream. Because in your book, you've got the Constitution, you've got
Mhm.
some of the core documents that when you reread them, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is not an awful place. Yeah, we made mistakes. Duh.
Yeah.
And in making those mistakes, we attempted to fix them. And in those fixes, perhaps that's where the pendulum swang wildly one way and wildly the other.
Mhm.
And we need to, I love the American dream. It's not so.
Where
I mean, it's
where
it's not.
else? Where else
Yeah,
can you
we're
do it?
the thing is, it's not saying that there's no there's nothing to be had in Europe or Asia or Africa or Australia or any of the other continents. I don't know. Did I miss a few? Um, but I,
Antarctic. You missed Antarctica.
and I'm not saying that that what progressed from Europe was coming here, having this very large country, and being able to do almost anything. No, being able to do anything. And then, screwing that up a little bit and making a few mistakes, right? Not necessarily doing it the right way, but learning from that and having a constitution that essentially, again, that grounding, those roots that grounds us so that we're able to fix things without rewriting everything. To some extent, it's like going back to the 10 Commandments,
Mhm.
which says, be nice to your neighbors. Don't covet people. Don't covet the wrong people. Needless to say, do the right thing. Do the right thing. And that was a very simple covenant written by tribes in a very
Mhm.
simple time that were wandering around the desert trying to find water where they could plant their seeds and family to grow.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
doing that, they were trying to do the right thing. They made mistakes, but those rules kept growing.
Right.
They kept growing, and we don't throw out again. Don't throw the baby out with the. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mhm.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Take a look at some of the. Reread the Constitution. Reread it, and then keep going. Gettysburg Address. I mean, understand. Don't kick it. I don't think it's down, but we're trying to blame greed on the American dream, and I think that's a low blow. You don't have to have America to be greedy.
No, no. Greed.
Machiavelli wasn't created in America.
You could say that Mr. Putin is pretty greedy, and
Yes.
yeah, and at a level that kills people for his objectives. Um, just as a side thought, have you ever been to Gettysburg? I think it's a wonderful place to go and get the feel for what that period of time was about, and to realize how close we came to losing our country at that point. If you stand on Little Round Top and look out at the battlefield and look at where the different divisions were and what was going on, we came very close to losing this country. And if you think about history in the world after 1860s, who would have saved Europe if we were five different countries? Who would have from Hitler's aggressiveness or from the Japan's aggressiveness? There was a reason that we stayed together and was so important. And we did have to compromise, and we made mistakes after that. And we're going to make more mistakes. The only time you're not making a mistake is when you're dead. I mean, where does wisdom come from? Wisdom comes from experience. Where does experience come from? It comes from making mistakes. So yeah, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to learn from them and move on.
Exactly.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully.
And we'll make some again and again.
I hope that we're able to begin listening to people again. I'm not exactly sure when this happened before in time, and how, at what level it had to have happened before. I mean, divisiveness, division has happened before. We had the Catholics and the Protestants. We had, whatever. It happened many, many, many times. England had so many divisions. What, the War of the Roses? I mean, come on.
Yeah,
It's
right.
not the first time.
No.
But we really need to, I don't know, slow down. Come out of the silo. We really need to listen.
We just get out of our silos. We know this for sure, that if you go volunteer, we'll use Habitat for Humanity as an example because we all know it. If you get out, turn off your TV, turn off your MSNBC, or turn off your phone, I don't care who you're listening to. Go spend a day, take your earphones out, and talk to the people you're building the house with and learn about them. You will be healthier mentally and physically. They've done studies that volunteer work actually makes you live longer. At Tampa Bay Watch, I was just at a dinner for the volunteers, and most of them are my age or a little bit younger, but the energy in that room and the feeling of all they've accomplished and all the oyster wreath balls we've put out and all the seagrass we've planted, they feel like something bigger than themselves, and it's a very diverse politically group of people. But it's not about their diversity. It's about what we've done together, and we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And a leader in this country who can articulate, we're part of something very special still, and it's bigger than me, and it's bigger than you. It's about us working together to make the world a better place and leave it better than we found it.
That legacy is important. It's really important. And that gets back to the kids. And what we're doing to our children is a disservice.
Yeah, and our behavior is, they're watching us. Your kids watching you really closely, and so the smart ones are saying, you know what? I'm going to grow up. I'm not going to do it that way.
God bless the smart ones.
Yeah. They're out there.
So, Chip, how can people find you or connect with you? Well,
then go to the website, unityandservice.org, or you can send me an email at chip@unityandservice.org. I urge people to buy my book. I'm interested in them reading it and then giving me feedback. I'm trying to start a movement where the people come together and demand that we get our act together and have everybody understand how they contribute to the long-term success of the country.
Well, I'll put all that information down below. And I hope that people will connect with you. It's been a pleasure talking with you and George. And
always a pleasure to talk to you, Joy.
And I look forward to staying in touch and seeing how you progress through your adventures.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then, folks, that's a wrap.